Well, we're going to try it again, John.
All right.
Day two of Brad and John in the morning. My name is Brad. His name is John Combest. And what he does is, as we've sort of determined yesterday, he's the political provocateur, correct?
That's a great way to describe it, Brad. Thank you. That's quite flattering.
And by the way, much better sound this morning. I don't know what you did.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah,
this is a little bit behind the scenes stuff, but I'm hooked up to an Ethernet cord now, so there will be no dropping out.
Well, we hope at least not. You know, we have some situations from time to time. Okay, now, those of you who listened yesterday was our first time, and we're trying this out. We're going to see what the hell happens here. This whole radio station, Egbert is giving us the chance of a lifetime where essentially he's saying, hey, have fun with my radio station, do some good stuff, just don't screw it up, right? Don't you like
That's
bosses?
Exactly right.
Don't you like bosses like that when they tell you that just don't screw it up, right? Okay.
Well, it's usually not their neck on the line. So, I mean, Brad, what do you and I have to lose? Nothing.
I got a lot to lose, but that's a whole other story. Okay, so what John does, John's done this, and I find this amazing since, what was the exact date? October of 2021?
October 2nd, 2001.
So you are 22 years now? 22 years
plus?
plus?
Yeah, a little more than 22 years.
Every single day, if you go to John's website, it's his name, John Combest, Combest, and John is the traditional John, johncombest.com. He does like a recap, or sort of like just an aggregation of all the stories, sort of like the Drudge Report, but the state of Missouri version, right?
That's exactly right. So newspapers, radio stations, television stations.
So let's start it out by asking, and I've got something I want to talk about, and I don't know if this is going to show up in your radar this morning. What's the top three things going on in the state of Missouri, according to the political provocateur John Combest this morning? What would you say?
Well, this morning, if you go to johncombest.com, you'll see I lead this morning with an interview that Congressman Mark Alford did with a mid-Missouri radio station, the Eagle in mid-Missouri. Mark Alford represents the Kansas City area, so not the downtown area, which is represented by Emanuel Cleaver, but kind of the suburbs area and a wide swath of western Missouri.
He talks
a little bit, Congressman Alford talks a little bit about spending, why he voted against continuing resolutions, a little bit about the Republican infighting in Washington, D.C., and he also officially announced that he's running for re-election. Closer to home, St. Louis City announced that they missed out on about $500,000 in revenue because, according to the city, they forgot to file the necessary paperwork with the state to collect a marijuana tax.
Really?
So this was a huge oversight. St. Louis Mayor Tashara Jones, spokesman, I should say, you never know these days, called it unacceptable that the city missed this deadline. But it's not quite clear who dropped the ball here. The city missed out on $500,000 in revenue that surely it could have used, and that's all because of an oversight.
Well, let me ask you something on that. See, because I know the marijuana thing, I mean, I have to tell you, I have a real problem with this whole situation. I really do. Because, once again, why, and let me go back for a minute. This is a tax grab on the state and the county and the municipal levels. Now, what I was sort of amazed at, the state gets what? I think 6%? Doesn't state get 6%?
Yeah, a percentage. Yeah, that's close to it.
Okay, and then they had the election where, remember, this was on the November ballot last year, wasn't it? Wasn't it November?
It was November. Yep.
November of last year, where the municipalities and the counties essentially said, hey, would you like us to have that 3% tax revenue as well, too? And the thing that's interesting about it is the cities and the counties both got 3%. So in other words, if you bought, and I believe I'm correct in this, I think it passed in almost all of the St. Charles County munis, at least the big ones, what we call the Westplex, St. Peter's, St. Charles, O'Fallon, things like that. So the city gets 3%, and the county gets 3%, and the state gets 6%. So when you go in to buy your dope, let's say, can I say that? You go to buy your dope, you're paying 12% tax above the sales tax, correct? Isn't that the way it works?
That's exactly right. And there's been a number of lawsuits whether these municipalities can actually stack the taxes like that. I believe that's still in litigation. But Brad, it's like anything else. Like when these local governments get an opportunity to tax something, whether it's cigarettes or whatever it is, they're obviously going to grab it.
So if you go in and buy $1 worth of marijuana, and I don't think you can buy a dollar's worth.
Right.
But if you were to buy a dollar's worth marijuana, essentially you've got like 22% tax on it,
Yeah,
correct?
depending on the municipality. for
Right,
sure.
and it varies
But hey,
from.
remember, Brad, it's medicine.
Yes,
And you need it for your glaucoma or your generalized
but
anxiety.
not anymore. It's recreational. They just blew the lid off the whole thing.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to say I'm an old guy because I'm an old guy, but John's a much younger guy than I am. But when I was a senior in high school, if let's say John Auble, because John Auble was around when I was a senior in high school.
That's right.
And we
He's
took-
our guy.
Right.
You know, can we make him the official or the unofficial mascot of the show?
I wish he was still around. He was
I know.
so
Russ,
much
he
fun.
died. He passed in 2017. I looked it up
Yeah,
yesterday.
he was so much fun. And what was great about him was, this probably from working in the media business, because, you dealt with a lot of media people.
Mm-hmm.
Some media people take themselves very seriously. You know what I'm saying?
Right,
They
right.
were just like, it's like Walter Cronkite Jr. I am
Right.
a journalist, though. But
Everybody's a Woodward and Bernstein
Right.
in Missouri.
But the thing that was cool about Auble was he was like this super journalist, but he was a fun guy. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
it
He
seems
was-
that way.
He was just really fun to be around. He was always cracking jokes, always making wisecracks and stuff like that. Okay, so I think I deterred you. So let me go back to what you said. Was this the money? Was this the overall money, or is this like the monthly money they had to file in the city of St. Louis that they didn't file?
Well, when a municipality passes a tax, they have a relatively short window. I believe it's 10 days to file necessary paperwork with the state to get the ball rolling on collecting those taxes. And the city of St. Louis just didn't file the paperwork. They forgot it, or whoever was in charge of it, was sick that day or at a protest or Lord knows what. But they just filed the deadline. Now, the upside for the city of St. Louis is that they went to the state and were able to get a waiver, essentially giving them a free pass to file the paperwork and collect revenue starting in January.
But-
so again, according to estimates, I think it was Alderwoman Megan Green said that she estimates the city missed out on somewhere north of $500,000.
I would think it would be more than that. Wouldn't you think it would be more than that?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. I think a lot of it just depends on proximity and what the sales were right there.
Mike Elam explained this to me, and that was the thing. And you just answered part of my other question, which I hadn't asked yet. See, you're like a mind reader. Okay, they voted on the thing in November, but I believe Mike said that the munis and the counties couldn't start getting money till the next year, which would have been January of this year. And that's essentially what you have then, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so in other words, they've lost out on the entire year's revenue, tax revenue then, right?
Well, I think that St. Louis City, unless I'm mistaken, actually voted on that tax in April.
Oh, okay. So they
But still, I mean, it's half of a year they've missed
It
out
wasn't on the ballot in November
Yeah.
like it was in St. Charles County. Because
That's right.
in St. Charles County, for the munis and for the county itself. Now, here's another thing, okay? I'm going to think about this for a minute. There's an advantage to St. Louis City not being in a county. You know what that is? Think about it for
What's
a minute.
that?
Oh, come on. You're a smart guy. You're gonna realize what I'm gonna say here in a minute.
I don't know. Go ahead.
If you go to St. Charles City and you buy your marijuana, you pay
Yeah.
the state tax 6%. You pay the
It's
muni
not
tax
stacked.
the
So in other words,
3%.
you're only paying one tariff, or you're paying two tariffs instead of three.
Exactly. You're only paying
Right.
because there is no county in St. Louis City because it's an independent city. So in other words, you're paying 9% tax on your marijuana, whereas if you went to St. Charles County, or probably if you want to go to St. Louis City, you're paying only 9%.
Boy, Brad, that is quite a tourism pitch for
Right. Come to the city and buy your marijuana and save 3%, right?
really worth it.
I've said, Shelley would get mad at me when I'd say these kind of things on the air. I go like, hey, a couple years from now it'll be cocaine. A couple years from then it'll be heroin.
Yeah.
It's recreational.
It's hard to make an argument against incrementalism. And in Missouri, fairly soon, I think in the coming years, we'll end up having legal psychedelics. I think it's going to be increasingly hard to make the case why psychedelics should be illegal if marijuana is.
See, now what's interesting is, I bet you there are people listening right now going, what the hell's he talking about? When this is actually happening, hasn't this already been passed in Oregon? One of the
Yeah, there are several states actually, and I mean they're the states that you would presume. I know it's Oregon, and it might be the state of Washington as well. But there's a number of veterans groups actually have taken the lead on how psilocybin, which is the active ingredient in psychedelic mushrooms, or the psychedelic active ingredient in mushrooms, can help victims of post-traumatic stress disorder and other things. So, it's pretty much the same path that we saw with marijuana. If you can make a medical case for it, that's kind of the tip of the spear, so to speak.
Yes, boys and girls, we are talking about magic mushrooms, right?
Absolutely, we sure are.
Which to me is like, okay, because see, and you said something very interesting, incrementalism.
Yes.
I learned that years ago, and to me that's fascinating. And essentially what it is that, like, let's say you got a neighbor who covets your lawn, okay? And he covets your lawn because your lawn looks better. So what he starts doing is every time he cuts his lawn, he cuts 6 inches more into your lawn.
Yep.
And then the next week, another 6 inches. So pretty soon, he's claimed 3 feet of your lawn, and you're going like, oh, whoa. Because once again, what's the old saying? If you put a
frog in a pot of boiling water.
Right. If you put a frog in a pot of boiling water, he realizes right away he's in trouble. But if you put a frog in a pot of water that's lukewarm, and then you slowly turn the heat up, he won't realize he's being cooked until it's too late.
And the great thing, and let's use magic mushrooms as an example here quickly. If you have a group of U.S. military veterans that say that psilocybin helped them overcome their PTSD, and you get 20 of them, and then and then it's medically approved for 2 years, then you use those folks to make the case of why can't every member of ex-military, people who've been abused, people who have a headache, why can't those people find relief too? And then it becomes, I'm big on the whole victimhood narrative. Then it becomes, I am entitled to have the same access to these tools that the first group of people have.
Well, yeah.
And that's incrementalism.
Well, and once again, it's to the point where I mean, you know what? I left my pocket Constitution out in my car again. I talked about this yesterday. You go back and look at the Prohibition, and I believe it was 1919. I believe that wasn't that? Didn't you think that was the right year, 1919?
Yeah,
Prohibition
I think so. That
went
makes sense.
And it wasn't thrown out until the late 20s. Okay,
right.
So here and once again, we have, and I don't know if you know this about me, I put myself through college as a police dispatcher. Did I ever tell you this?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you've listened to the station. You've heard me talk about this probably too many times. Shelley, I never heard he was a police dispatcher. In so many ways, that changed my life because this was a long time ago. This is when driving drunk was, and I hate to even say this, it sounds very crass and callous right now. Driving drunk was not that big of a deal.
It was permissible.
Yeah, and it was to the point, he had a few too many, and he drove off the road and hit a tree. It was that kind of stuff, okay? And then it got to the point where I think and I don't know, actually, I should probably look, it's probably on Wikipedia, the founding of MAD, where all it takes is one person or a group of people to say, hold on a minute, this is not right. This is wrong, and we have to change things. And now it's to the point where driving drunk, for the most part, tell me if you agree or disagree, is socially reprehensible.
It's frowned upon.
Right.
For sure.
To the point where if somebody says, well, so-and-so got pulled over DWI, he hit a couple mailboxes in a subdivision, people are going, wow, he's a terrible person. And back 50 years ago, it was just, he's a party animal. Yeah, what do you expect? That kind of stuff.
But, and Brad, let me point out too that today, among the younger set, and by younger I mean Gen X folks such as myself, which aren't that young anymore, but also it's almost a status symbol today to be able to afford an Uber. So if I meet up with my buddies, male, female, whatever, somewhere in St. Louis, and I don't drink, but they drink, and if they get loaded, it's nothing to have them do, they'll take an Uber to the bar and an Uber home. And it's kind of a flex that you can drop $50 or $60 on an Uber and not worry about it, instead of thinking, it's fine, I'm not going to pay for a taxi like you had to do 10 years ago and drive home.
You know, it's funny you should mention that because I have a list of things to talk about today. We'll talk about this a little bit later. You know, I'm a radio geek, you know that, and I listen to a lot of
Absolutely.
different radio stations. And yesterday I was driving around taking care of some business. I was listening to The Patriot, 104.9, and with Clay and Buck, okay? And I wrote a note. Let's do that in the third segment today. We'll talk about what they're talking about, airports and Uber, okay, which I thought was interesting. Okay, so I sort of sidetracked you. I apologize if I did that. You got to number 2. What was the number 3 story?
Oh, let's see. Actually, in real time. I'll scroll down here. Let's see. You know, an interesting thing is that the Missouri Public Service Commission has approved Ameren's time of use rates. And I think everybody in our listening area is dealing with this right now. And essentially, all the energy companies across the United States, it costs them more money to produce energy during the day. Like, energy is just more expensive during the day. And they've been trying to figure out how they can pass that cost along to consumers. And in doing so, they had to go to the Missouri Public Service Commission to get approval for it. Now, the Missouri Public Service Commission just last week, or maybe it was earlier this week, I think it was the end of last week, just approved Ameren's default, which is that if you don't choose, essentially, you're going to be put in the default spending more category unless you choose not to.
Okay, translate what that means.
Well, that means is for most of us, so I'll use myself as an example. I chose the plan whereby if I use electricity from 9 p.m. at night to 9 a.m., I'm charged at a lower rate than I would if I used electricity during the day. You see what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. Now, what's fascinating to me about this is, and once again, I'm a nerd about this kind of stuff.
Yep.
Ameren UE switched over to their smart meters.
Yep.
Where, and once again, one of the nice features of the smart meter is that if you don't pay your bill, they don't even have to send somebody out. They just hit a switch and your meter turns itself off.
You're done.
All right. But to me, what's frustrating about this is they chose not to give you access to your meter. Now, when I say that, some of the meters out there, we don't have them in the St. Louis area, but some of the meters out there around the country have a Wi-Fi connection where you can log into your meter and you can watch your electricity usage real time. Now, what Ameren's doing is they're doing that on their end, but you don't have access to it, at least real-time access to it. And the idea being is that you have to go through them for access. Now, what's sort of also interesting about this is they are using AI on your meter, and they can figure out by certain signatures that your various appliances and things like that have as far as turning off and turning on and cycling and things like that. They know what's in your house. They know.
I believe that.
What's that?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly believe that that's true.
They know that you have a washer and a dryer. They know you have 2 or 3 refrigerators or maybe 1. And they know what time you wash your clothes. They know what time you run your dryer. And I'm going like, no, hold on a minute now. Because part of that and what they've been leading up to with these smart meters is exactly what you're talking about, that in the old days with the old meter that spun around and around and around, they had no idea when you were using electricity. They had a rough idea on the entire grid because they knew there was, they were so
when
much.
There would be a surge.
Right. That, and matter of fact, when I first got into the broadcasting business, one of the things that was interesting, matter of fact, came up in my college classes. Did you know back in the day, back in the 50s and even through the 60s, municipalities built their sewage and their water systems for peak demand during commercial breaks on network television? Did you know
I didn't know that.
Yes.
I did not know that. But I have heard of the flush test.
Right.
Which is where they're able to tell in the morning when people get up.
Right. And the idea being is back in the day when everybody had their choice of, like here in St. Louis, we had essentially three channels. We had 2, 4, and 5. We had ABC on 2, we had CBS on 4, and NBC on 5. And then you have, obviously, you had PBS, you had KTC and KDNL, and then, our KPLR, and then it came along KDNL. So the idea being is that if everybody in the country at 7:30 at night was watching a particular show and a commercial break came on, everybody went to the bathroom at the same time, and they flushed the toilet at the same time. So they had to engineer the water system so it could take that peak of demand for the water going through the system, and then the peak of supply of sewage coming through the system. So they had to design the system. And see, it was interesting because my dad was a civil engineer, and I talked to him about this, and he goes, "Yep." He says that's, and he told me the whole story about how there was a factor you had to factor in that, if you had an average flow in a water main of, I don't know, so many gallons per minute or something like that, or gallons per second, that there was peak demand times. And it's sort of like, I don't know, you're probably too young for this, but there was a time when in my subdivision where I grew up as a kid, in the summer, when you watered your lawn, you couldn't get much pressure out of the hose because
I remember those days.
Everybody was
absolutely, and especially at your own house, if you were running a washing machine,
right?
Yep.
Right. If everybody in your neighborhood was running their sprinkler, you didn't get much water out of your sprinkler system.
Yep.
And that was primarily because the water main was not sized properly. Anyway, we have to take a break. He's John. I'm Brad. Together we are. What are we doing? I don't know. Egbert's letting us have some fun with the radio station, but we do have to pay some bills because he informed us that he's not going to spend money on everything when he can make some money off advertisers. So here we go. It's 7:24.